Good morning again, everyone. We're now moving into Committee of Whole, February 10th, 2026. The Committee of Whole will be conducting this meeting in hybrid format with participation both in person and by video or telephone conference in accordance with Section 199 of the Municipal Government Act. Members of the public are welcome to attend in the meeting in person in council chambers. Those of you wishing to attend virtually hopefully have all the information you already need for Teams, otherwise you wouldn't be hearing my voice. Or being dialed in already, you wouldn't hear my voice there. We have an agenda before us. Is there any additions, deletions, or changes? Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Also move.
Motion is on the floor. Any discussion on that motion? Call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. We have a gentleman that's been waiting for a while. Item number 2.1, Planning 101 and on-site servicing threshold discussion. I hear this is a stellar report. There'll be circles and arrows and diagrams and sparkles.
There are circles, yes.
Fireworks. We're not pushing up to lunch, so we're doing a lot really good. So go ahead.
Make sure we're out of here by then.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning. Taylor Felt with administration. I have a presentation here. It's Planning 101, followed by a discussion regarding on-site servicing thresholds. The presentation's broken down into two separate parts with time for questions and discussion in between there. And I'll make sure I stop and let us know when we're moving on. Okay. So I have the agenda here up on the screen for the two parts. And I'll start by saying that we know that our residents are invested in their communities, not only from a financial standpoint, but also emotionally as well. Communities are places where homes are built, families grow, and businesses can thrive. On the other hand, we know that a lot of good things can come with growth and development. We get new employment opportunities, infrastructure upgrades, new community amenities. But with growth comes change, and it's understandable that change really does need to be handled delicately. With growth and change, it also comes a potential for conflict, which is where the planning process can offer value. It provides a roadmap to mitigate potential land use conflicts, which we see with some of our applications that we receive by council or MPC. Ultimately, planning seeks to balance the expectations of existing residents with the need for responsible growth. And these are the themes that we'll explore throughout this first part of the presentation here. The second part of the presentation focuses on a question related to the municipal development plan policies, specifically lot creation, and then the threshold for where piped or offsite water and wastewater servicing is required. And I'll provide a bit of background on that topic, review the policy considerations, share a bit of a regional context there, and present a suggestion from administration. So what is planning? At its core, land use planning is the process for accommodating growth and development within the existing landscape. Doing this well involves carefully balancing the rights of individual landowners to develop their property with the interests of residents and stakeholders who may be impacted by those changes. Planning as a process is grounded in the common good, and it reflects the democratic principles that guide municipal decision-making. Ultimately, the goal of good land use planning is to ensure that growth occurs in a way that is thoughtful, coordinated, and sustainable. I really should have had some more moving objects on these slides here. Sorry for all the text. So how do we translate this in day-to-day decision-making? When reviewing applications, the county is guided by several core planning values. And these include supporting the efficient and orderly development of land, ensuring cost-effective provision of services, promoting economic and community opportunities, and respecting existing communities by reducing the potential for land use conflicts. And collectively, these values help position the county to make informed, balanced decisions that support responsible long-term growth. So planning's been described to me as a burden, red tape, or a roadblock. So it's fair to, I'm sure you've heard that as well. So why is it important, and important to whom? So planning matters because, as I mentioned earlier, people are deeply invested in their communities. These are the places where they invest their time, their energy, and financial resources, whether that's the businesses they've built on their land over many years, or the homes and lots that they've created for their families to grow. All of this contributes to a strong sense of community in place for folks in the county. Because residents have stakes in their community, a stake in their communities, change to the landscape must be approached carefully, consistently, and transparently. The planning process provides a structured way to do that, ensures that applicants, residents, and the county are aware of the long-term goals, understand expectations and requirements, and they're informed of potential changes, and that they have the opportunity to participate in decision-making that shapes the future of their community. And just as importantly, the process, essentially the hope is that the process builds confidence that changes are safe, efficient, and that they're viable. These principles are reflected clearly in the public hearing and engagement process that we have, excuse me, that we're all familiar with. Creating the county's municipal development plan requires significant public engagement, and once approved, the MDP is publicly available. It clearly sets out the county's principles, values, and expectations and requirements for future change. When a new proposal is received, the public is notified and given the opportunity to review the proposal. Residents are invited to provide comment or speak directly to the proposal. And together, these steps help create confidence in an open, transparent, and accountable decision-making process. So with this in mind, we can understand how the planning process adds value to applicants, our residents, and the county. For applicants and developers, plans and policies provide clear understanding of what may be supported and what requirements must be addressed with the application. Clarity and consistency help proponents prepare stronger applications and identify ways to mitigate potential conflicts early on in the process. For residents, statutory plans provide a vision for the future and help them anticipate change while the planning process ensures there's opportunities for their participation, encourages open dialogue, and supports transparent and accountable decision-making again. For the county, the planning process supports the safe and efficient provision of infrastructure, and it promotes the orderly development of land. It can help guide growth in alignment with long-term objectives, supports fiscal responsibility through cost-effective delivery of services. It promotes economic opportunity and reduces the potential for land use conflict again. Importantly, it ensures that the county fulfills its legislative mandate and allows council and the Municipal Planning Commission to rely on established policy prior to making decisions. So I'm just going to work in an example here and move back up to the applicant slide. So if we consider a proposal for a new aggregate operation, we know that gravel is an important resource for economic development and infrastructure, and that it can also be a contentious development in our communities. So for the developer, the planning process provides clarity. The statutory plans and policies help signal whether the use will be appropriate in a particular area. It identifies what technical studies will be required and how potential offsite impacts can be addressed. They can build a stronger application for the county and make informed investment decisions before they commit significant resources on their side of things. And then for residents, they have the opportunity to participate at multiple stages here in the approvals process. This is their opportunity to help shape the long-term vision through the creation of statutory plans such as the municipal development plan, and engaging in the review of specific proposals. And in this case, it would be, say, a land use redesignation to the natural resource extraction district. This ensures that residents are informed, able to raise concerns, and also supports a transparent and thoughtful approach to the change in their neighborhood. And from the county's perspective, the planning process provides a structured framework to evaluate proposals against adopted policy, infrastructure capacity, environmental considerations, and long-term land use objectives. It supports balanced decision-making, reduces the potential for conflict, and helps ensure that council's decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the broader public interest. So we have the circles here. The planning process doesn't eliminate differing perspectives. It provides a structure to evaluate and balance them responsibly. So on the right here, we can see some of the main actors in the planning process and their interests in their respective circle. If we don't consider the county's interest in planning decisions, it could lead to public health and safety concerns. If we ignore the residents, we might lose their trust. And if we ignore the developer, there likely isn't a financially viable product for the market out there. So council and the Municipal Planning Commission ultimately play a critical role in striking this balance and making informed decisions that align with the long-term objectives. Adopted policies are particularly valuable in this regard, as they help support consistent decision-making and defend those decisions when they're challenged. Excuse me. So in Wheatland County, we commonly see planning proposals to change a land use district. So from the agricultural district to, say, industrial general district. It's the creation of new parcels, expanding existing uses and developments, and responding to emerging trends such as renewable energy or non-traditional uses such as data processing facilities. The Municipal Government Act essentially provides the higher order framework for how municipalities have to evaluate these types of proposals. It also enables and in some cases requires the county to adopt policy documents that guide these decisions. These include county-wide frameworks such as the Municipal Development Plan and Land Use Bylaw, as well as a more localized or regional plan such as area structure plans and area concept plans. And together they provide residents, applicants, and the decision makers with clarity about the type of development that may be expected over time. So there are 4 general types of planning applications received by the county that facilitate the proposals I just mentioned. So over the next few slides, we'll briefly review what a statutory plan is, a land use redesignation application, subdivisions and development permits. These stages in the process transition from a broad regional perspective, so high-level goals and objectives, right down to site-specific development requirements. So you might be looking at an area structure plan and broadly how that development will take shape over time, to a site plan that shows you where an approach is, how far the home will be set back from the property lines, these sorts of things. And the main point here is that at each stage, there's different things that need to be considered and different approving authorities with the various stages or applications. And each stage, this is the important piece, is that each stage, the previous approval influences the next as we get down to that site-specific plan. So starting with statutory plans here, these plans provide a roadmap for future development and establish mutual expectations when change is proposed. Examples include our various intermunicipal development plans, the municipal development plan, and area structure plans. These plans are adopted by bylaw, by council, following the public hearing process, and must comply with the higher level statutory plan. As such, these plans form part of the county's legislative framework and guide how planning decisions are made. With redesignations, these are applications that are made to amend the land use bylaw and most commonly made to redesignate a land use district to allow for future subdivision or development on the lands. At this stage, one of the main considerations is where the proposal aligns with the approved statutory plan, so the higher order plan, and the goals in that plan and whether or not the receiving area is appropriate for the proposed use. Redesignations, again, are adopted by bylaw, by council, following the public hearing process. On the right side of the screen here, we have a Schedule A from a recent land use redesignation approval. It shows essentially a portion of the land that's proposed to be redesignated from the Ag General District to the Country Residential District to support future subdivision and, you know, likely a home in the future. So next is the subdivision stage. We're getting closer to that lot size in terms of plans and applications. Subdivision is the process of creating new parcels from existing ones, and it's governed by provincial legislation as well as county bylaws, policies, and statutory plans. Unlike policy and redesignation applications, subdivision decisions are based primarily on technical merit, and they must comply with the adopted statutory plan. So applicants are required to demonstrate that new lots can be created without negatively affecting the adjacent lands. This typically involves technical considerations such as access, drainage, servicing, environmental constraints, and where necessary, the submission of additional supporting documents that council or staff via council see fit. In Wheatland County, subdivision decisions are made by the Municipal Planning Commission. If an application meets all applicable requirements and does not result in undue impacts, it must be approved. And if it doesn't comply, it must be refused. And subdivision decisions are conditional or conditions are subject to appeals through appropriate appeal authority. This can be the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board at the local level or the LPRT, Land and Property Rights Tribunal Board, which is at a higher provincial level. And then now at that site-specific application or plan, we have development permits. So a development permit allows a specific use to proceed on a parcel of land in accordance with the county's land use bylaw and any higher order applicable plan. The review process focuses on technical merit, site design, and compliance with regulations such as building height, setbacks from property lines or other structures on the property, parking, landscaping, and the overall function and flow of the site layout. The key question here at this stage is whether the proposed development can proceed without creating undue impacts on adjacent properties. Approvals may be granted with conditions and are typically issued by the county's development officer or the Municipal Planning Commission. So while development permits don't require a public hearing, decisions are still subject to an appeal to the appropriate authority. An example of a development permit we have here on the screen, I believe this is the CGC plan. You can see again how the level of detail increased as we went from, say, an area structure plan or an intermunicipal plan down to site specific at the lot level. So that takes us through the first part of the presentation here. That was probably a lot to take in, but now's our opportunity to have some discussion, ask some questions, and we're here to help facilitate that conversation.
Thank you very much so far, Councillor Baker, and then Councillor Kester, and anybody else after.
I have a question, yes, and this has been, I've been thinking about this for quite a while. So when you get to the subdivision part of approving a subdivision, you guys ask for, or we ask for water and sewer or septic, right? Availability, we need to see an engineer and we ask for all that, and they have to do that before they get, bring it to us. But when it comes to, let's say an aerial structure plan, the industry that goes in there, why wouldn't they have to give us their water usage and their sewage, and if that is doable for that?
So at that level, just to ask a question back to you, are you referring to creating, say, an area structure plan, or when a development permit's proposed in an area structure plan?
When a development permit or a land use is even any kind of land use for industry. When CGC went in there, I'm not sure if before we changed the land use, did we need the water and the sewer? I believe we never did ask for that.
So at a high level, when we're creating an area structure plan, say the Goldfinch Industrial Area Structure Plan, we do have to look at how servicing will be provided in the plan. In some cases, it's brought in by pipe. Sometimes it's up to the individual landowner, the development, to demonstrate that through subsequent applications. When a development goes into an approved area structure plan, we will have policies on what those requirements are at the development permit stage or the subdivision stage. They do need to demonstrate that they can safely draw water and treat wastewater.
Through the Reeve to council, to clarify on that, an area structure plan, there are, as he showed on the hierarchy of documents, an area structure plan is a hierarchy, a planning guide document. It sets the framework. So it's right below the municipal development plan. So it won't, and they do give us in area structure plans, they will give us viable options, and it may not be the end solution that they do, but they will provide technical studies saying that there are several viable options for water solutions, but they don't actually do, it'll be a high exercise for some of it. And they give us a road work transportation network study. They will give us wastewater solutions. And then sometimes they know enough, depending on the area. And in Wheatland's case, we don't have pipe servicing in every community. So our policies won't be as firm as saying you have to have pipe servicing. And we know the capacity of that pipe servicing and what the servicing availability is. We sometimes leave it open that they have to come later and provide a on-site solution is what's typically been done, where they will come up with their own water solution or their own wastewater solution. Or in the instances of some of the Highway 1, truck haul in, pump out. So it's just enough to show that it's viable. And then as we get to land use, they provide a little more. Sometimes what we've done, we've asked for further details that you might see that can be confusing. It's not required at land use. We ask for it because they are on a fast track for subdivision or development permit. We know they're headed that way, and that if they give us all the technical studies earlier, it helps them at the next stage of the development permit or subdivision stage. But in order to prove land use, you don't need that high level of technical documents as you do at subdivision and development permit stage.
So I guess my point is, if we're doing it that way for industry or for larger industry, why do we ask? I believe that I feel like the subdivision part, we should wait and do that part. Ask for the water and the sewer at the development permit instead of the subdivision part.
Through the Reeve, maybe an example to help contextualize it would be adding an area structure plan for future residential development beside Carsland. At that higher level plan, we need to understand how the next 100 subdivisions and homes in that area structure plan will be serviced. Is there existing capacity in the pipe servicing that Carsland avails of now that can be extended to that community? If not, what's the next option? So it's where that high level planning takes place. And again, as we get down to the lot level, that's where we get more detail on how that connection will actually be made to the lot.
Okay.
Through the Reeve and for one more thing to clarify on that technical study between subdivision and development permit. We ask for a certain level that's not always like a stage one private sewage treatment system. It's a desktop thing. And sometimes it'll come back the soil's not viable. There are times that we may ask for more, but we technically would leave that, and it would be a condition that that would be done at development permit stage, because it would be through a permit. If it's wastewater treatment on site, they would have to get a sewage permit, private sewage treatment permit, which would then would have to do soil sampling. We've run into situations, and yes, it's buyer beware, but sometimes what we do is we'll have a subdivision where they won't prove out some of this. The next person buys that lot, comes in with a development permit, and will say, well, wait, they had all the approvals to get the subdivision, but it wasn't viable. And then we're in a situation where they're having to put in holding tanks to deal with sewage, which can be not long-term, not sustainable over costs.
Counselor Kester. Can you turn on your microphone, please, and get, so everybody can hear?
Yeah, that one there, and the green one there, when it intersects, you got money for profit. I've always been, since I got here, you can't use money profit as a guide to development. I know it's part of, that's why the guy wants it, right? He wants to build a factory and make money. But for my decision here, is that an appropriate place to have him? Not, is that an appropriate place for him to make money? Right? So I think that dollar sign, that for profit, is misleading for ours. I know for people out there planning to have one, they're definitely want to make some money. But that's not our prime driver. Is that a good place for them? Because it's profitable.
Through the Reeve to council. In situations for municipalities, some municipalities do have a fiscal impact model that they use when a large development comes in, whether it's residential, and it's based on capital and operating costs. So usually you'll hear an applicant when they bring in a large subdivision or an area structure plan, they're going to do all this subdivision. It's going to be bring in all this revenue to the county. But when you run it through these fiscal impact models, sometimes it shows that initially as they start up, and then the long term of capital replacement and the services that you then have to provide for those residents, it starts to become an actual a negative and not a benefit. And so it's not used, as you say, in the sense to look at how that's going to be a financial benefit to the developer, but what is that impact for that development on the county's resources?
Okay. So having said that, you got an individual acreage owner there and not going to be profitable for the county ever. Right? Even a bigger development, say like the Merrifields, it's still a toughie to gain a profit.
Can you, sorry, just about the acreage thing, I don't understand your reasoning behind that it would be a negative thing for the amount of services we provide when they do everything on site. That's all their expense. All we do is a road. I just don't know. It's good
Okay.
how you think that way.
20-some years ago when I was a counselor, we had one development officer, did all the subdivisions, all the development in the county. There was virtually none. We built a new building after, but they shared the building in Strathmore. There was not much staff. And the staff we had was to accommodate the road building. County's budget was way less. But as soon as we got more acreages, well, look at the size now. That's just one way of looking at it. If we put an acreage out there, there's an extra approach the grader has to go around. we have to provide extra services, just extra graveling. Sometimes you get enough of them on there like that, right? You have to oil it. Right? If there was nobody living here, there wouldn't be any roads. So does the residential tax pay for everything? That's just the way I look at it.
But we don't know that because if you have, you go by road counts. So if an industry comes in and causes the, I know, but if the road count is high, it's got to be high because there's either industry in the area or there's 10 to 12 acreages. If there's 10 to 12 acreages and they're paying $8,000 a year over however, how many years it is to build out and how many years are going to come, I think that is paying for being oiled or MRO or even being paved. So we don't know. Plus the industry, whatever we get from the industry would be paying. It's just a more progressive way of looking at it. That's all.
It's more a question of landowners and what they want to do with their land.
Absolutely.
They want to sell it off to an acreage, we allow it. They want to build a factory. Yeah, that's your problem to make money at it. The county, we run into a problem, we don't have enough money, we just raise the taxes. It's just a function of what we are. But if there was nothing out there, we would have no taxes. I mean, it's just that simple. But the more you get, right?
Councillor Larson.
And now for something completely different. And I laughed at you about the red tape thing because I hear that a lot. So I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can show the public the value of planning? So a couple things that just popped into my head is, something on our webpage, things to know about planning before you begin or something like that. Because from what I've been doing and from the stuff I've heard, almost every time when they're complaining about red tape or whatever, they don't understand the process that we have to go through to do this. And that process isn't something we just grabbed out of thin air. I'll give you an example, that gravel one that we ended up doing. The guy phoned me and he said, well, I shouldn't have to jump through all these hoops because it's just a short term. And so I asked for all of the stuff that you guys did. And when I looked at it, you went through, you guys followed the process to the letter. That person either just didn't know or maybe didn't care. I don't know about the process. So I'm just wondering if there's a way. It just seems to me that it might be beneficial for us to be able to put something out there that might help to raise public awareness, which might in turn raise less complaints to you and maybe even me. Just a thought.
Through the brief, we do have some information online. Perhaps we could put it more clearly on
And
the
maybe it's
website.
just that people aren't accessing it. I honestly
Yeah.
don't know, but I thought if there's a way to raise awareness of it, if we have something, maybe we just need to raise awareness of it. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Through the reeve to council, that's an excellent idea, actually, because what we do have on is probably too verbose and we have to be a little more creative in the way we're portraying it. So we'll take that back and
Yeah, just
try to
like
update it to make it more creative because I don't think people can find it.
yeah. And people are going to go, I mean, it's the same with a web page. You use the 3-click rule, right? If it takes you more than 3 clicks to get to where you're going, you're not going there. And the same with this, if they get that and they see this great big essay, for lack of better words, of what they're not going to read that. They need some bullet points that says, here's the things that you need to keep in mind. Just as
Good feedback. I think as there's a lot of pre-planning meetings I've seen. People have talked to me and I said, have you engage staff. Before you go, they'll walk you through the process. Some people like it one-on-one, some people will go to a website, but I think we offer that still. And it's not, we don't charge as long as it's reasonable time. There's a certain amount of time we can give. And it gives them the whole process. I've recommended it to many people to do, you know, before you go down that road, go find out what you have to do.
Through the to council, I know this is something I do day in and day out. Many of you are making decisions on a weekly, monthly basis related to planning, but we know that when we meet with folks, this might be the first and only time they interact with the land use planning process. And it can be a lot to digest and navigate. So we do try and help folks on that front. But your comment there, Councillor Larson, just last week, I had somebody come into the office. They had purchased a 3-acre parcel of land that was created 20 or more years ago. And this is where the value really stuck out for me, is that back in that era, we didn't require all of these technical studies, such as a groundwater or wastewater study. And because we didn't at that time, when they did look at doing a development permit and putting in a new system, the soil conditions weren't ideal for, say, a typical tank and field solution. So it meant at this stage, unfortunately, a system was going to cost $60,000 to $80,000. So knowing that ahead of time before you decide to create the lot gives you flexibility to make a bigger parcel size. So maybe the soils can treat that wastewater, or relocate the parcel to an area where the soils can effectively treat wastewater at a much lower cost. So
I think Councillor Clayton had his hand, and then Councillor Kester.
Mine question is, again, is trying to learn what the heck goes on. Like, this is an agricultural based area that has a lot of farm people in it, and that's the livelihood of the county. It's slowly changing into a lot of industrial side of with de Havilland and the wallboard plant and that kind of thing. In your discussion, I didn't see anything that addressed agricultural land use and redesignation limits that people should know right up front, because and the other one was environment, which is overseeing almost everything. So just a question.
through the Reeve, the next part of this presentation will dive into some of those thresholds and specifics. Heavy focus on preservation of ag land. But taking a few steps back here, when municipalities are creating these higher order plans, I'll flip back to this diagram here. When we're creating these higher level plans at the intermunicipal level, the municipal development plan, even area structure plans, this is really the process that says in some communities, we want industrial development over here, we want residential development over here, and we want continued agricultural development in these areas. And then that is an opportunity, again, clear communication for developers, residents, and the county to understand where that type of development should be directed. And that's where some of these thresholds start to appear. If you want to make changes to those plans, how do we do that? What's required?
Councillor Kester.
Thank you. Subdivisions for profit. A lot of those 30-year-old subdivisions that are somebody, oh, I got the subdivision, 2-3 acres. And what am I going to do with it? Most of those were done for profit. People that were farming didn't want to sign their whole quarter section over to the bank. When a acreage is worth almost this much. A lot of those acreages were owned by the banks for credit facilities. That's why there's so many undeveloped acreages out there. We don't do that many now because you'll see them get built on. But now why it was done at the time for profit, we heard is not an easy thing to deal with now. Right, yeah.
I did not know that. Thank you.
Yeah.
To further that in my area, there's pretty much every quarter section has that and also has a well drilled on it through a well drilling program that was agricultural. So it's kind of, they're there. And if the commodity prices go down low enough, those will be sold. I guarantee it. They've been there for 25 years. I've seen them. Yeah. One thing before we go forward. So kind of what Councillor Bigger was going on to. So the small systems, like the uncertified system, the single acreage or whatever, the problem I have with this and the understanding. So the well driller is a licensed well driller, M&M or whoever would be out there. They're all certified drillers. They have a certain requirement that they have to meet with Alberta Environment. Now the Alberta government in the last 20 years has said even the septic fields have to be through a certified installer. So what I see now is people have to go get an engineer to say it's okay when actually these two entities cannot do anything that is illegal. They have to do the soil samples. They have to do all that stuff by the trade. I don't know if there's a gap there somewhere. And I don't know why we actually are making them double engineer it, if so to speak. Like it doesn't make sense to me because they're certified installers. If they go out there and say the homeowner says, I want that there, they can't do it. They have to say, yeah, it's not suitable for land, or this well report is registered. It's all registered with Alberta Environment. And in the ultimate end of it, we have no authority over it. We're not operating anything. It's their own personal use. There's not, and I say non-certified for a reason because they can't sell it to anybody. It's their own. So go ahead. Please explain.
Through the reef, I'll do my best here. So again, this is maybe where we look at beyond a single parcel, right? We know in some areas of the north of the county, the water tables are low or aquifers aren't generating as much as other parts of the county. So when we are creating a new parcel of land, one of our mandates under the subdivision development regulations is that we do have to ensure that that new lot is viable, and it specifically is required to demonstrate availability of water and wastewater treatment. Creating the lot without that information or going through a redesignation without some understanding of whether it's viable, we get to the development permit stage and costs could go up, especially when you're looking at wastewater, right?
So I understand that, but I'm saying that information is available from the installers. They're trained in that. Like if you want to know if there's what water is available within the county, there's several drillers that have been here forever that could come tell you, and they have the historic reports to do that. They may not be as polished as a hydrologist or whatever, but that information is there. And same with the you know what I'm saying? Like it seems to go over and above local knowledge when actually in this case, local knowledge is probably the most important thing.
Through the reef, that's really important. When it comes to the wastewater reports that are required, it's actually done by designer or installer. For water availability, it is a desktop review provided by typically a hydrogeologist, but that's where it looks at the aquifer in the area, its potential, and whether we can punch more holes into it.
The impact it'll have.
And specifically under the Water Act, those reports need to demonstrate clearly, all of ours have since I've been here, say that you have to prove that an additional well is not going to impact existing groundwater users.
So they have a zone of influence around a well. So if legal wise, if someone says you've influenced it, there's a document that says, I forget what it is, 50 meters or something from that surface casing, there's no known engineering that can actually prove that you affected somebody else. Like if it goes to legal, that's where it goes to. So that's just something I don't know if I'm sure you're aware of, but that's where it goes down to is have you impact. And I hear people all the time, well, some so-and-so's, CFOs draining the aquifer, things like that. Or somebody's watering their grass too much and my well's going down, when in fact you've been in a drought for 10 years and everybody's well's going down. But when you try to define who's affecting who, how far do you look? And make sure you're not going out of what's legally, what actually you could prove legally. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and through the reach, kind of add to that. So If at that desktop phase, it's saying there's no problems, it generally is something that everybody can support. We have had subdivision applications, you might recall, where there was some mutual drawdown interference with adjacent wells. That's then where a phase 2 might come in, where they actually drill, run the pump test, see the potential, and can maybe tune that prediction a bit more to understand if it is actually going to have an impact.
And a lot of Wheatland County was mapped through the CB, coal bed methane was developed here. All those wells were mapped and pump tested, all that stuff. So
And through the Reeve to council, these reports that are done at subdivision are passed on to the development permit stage. They're not repeating them. So then whoever is doing the design takes that work and proceeds from there. So they're not doing an additional cost over it. We're using those same documents are submitted at this development permit stage.
And then a little further this, ultimately, if they don't have water and wastewater, they can't do it on site. And I know administration has stated like pump in, pump out. That's a financial decision to that person. And if they didn't do the research to find out if there was water on an acreage they're buying, it's honestly not this council's problem or the municipality's problem. It's buyer beware. We can't assume that responsibility for someone that did not research what the land they're buying. If a farmer buys a chunk of land that's can't grow a stick of anything on it, that's their problem. It's not the municipalities. If an industry buys a swamp and wants to build a shop on it and it sinks out of sight, yes, there's some engineering. If they want to spend $10 million and put pilings underneath it, and that's their business. It's not ours. Like that's where I'm going. Like ultimately it's up to them. It's buyer beware, and we don't assume any responsibility on that, nor should we. We got to be careful, you know.
Yeah, through the Reeve, I mean, we do have the legislative mandate when creating a new lot. Yes, I understand the situation with existing land and adding development. So it is our responsibility when creating new lots, new development is expected, that we can ensure it's viable.
Fair enough. I'm good. Go ahead.
So just, are we gonna is it in the next part of your presentation where it's the number of acreages, okay, I'll wait for that. Thank you.
Proceed then.
I have, I have
You
one
want to take
more.
a break
I have one more.
or just
Scott?
want us to stop? Go ahead.
I have a quick question. For these accessory buildings, is there any way that, because, you know, we don't ask for if there's water available, we don't ask for engineered report. So is it, so they're punching a new well in, some of them, and maybe we should be asking them to, they must have to go off the existing well. Just a thought, because then we're not actually punching in, because we're not subdividing, we're not doing anything, so we're not asking for that information. I'm just wondering if accessory built, accessory
Secondary
dwelling, sorry, accessory dwelling, sorry.
I see.
Yeah.
Through the Reeve to council, we do have those existing developments in the county where they are building accessory dwellings or garden suites, as they're often called, where they are sharing those services.
Oh, do they have to share the services? No,
they
that's
don't.
what I'm saying. We should actually have it so they have to.
Through the Reeve, we would have to then, that might put us in a position where we have to ask for some information, understand if that's possible to do it safely.
Okay,
On that line of thought, so what about a farm that has multiple wells? Like mine, I have a couple. And this one's for the pasture, one's for the house, and I can interchange. Like it's how do you? Yeah.
all right, I'll drop it.
No, I don't know. Like
No.
it's a good discussion.
Through the Reeve to council, wells that are drilled are regulated by Alberta Environment. And so they will look at each well and the impact, as Mr. Felt has said, about the draw on adjacent wells. So we look at it to make sure it's viable for a landowner coming in. And it's true, at the end of the day, it may not be viable when they go to prove it out and they have to do pump in, pump out, but it becomes a decision whether they want to build on that site because it becomes unsustainable. But at the end of the day, that wells are regulated by Alberta Environment.
And there's a minimum amount that they, as a household, 3 gallons a minute or less or something like that.
Through the reef, sorry, can you repeat that figure?
The gallon per minute, there's a minimum amount that say is for household use. That's it.
Through the reef, I believe it's 1,250 cubic meters that they're allowed
Yeah.
to divert.
Yeah.
So again, they would have to look at how that allotment would be affected by having 2 residences drawing on that well. Another consideration, and as you suggested, there are municipalities that do require that. And what that would prevent in the future is possibly subdividing the lot so that the primary dwelling and the accessory dwellings on separate. Because part of our role, again, at the subdivision stage is delineating individual servicing per lot. That could become complicated.
So kind of circling back, so would that be part of the MDP then? We'd be looking at that? Yeah, but I'm just thinking that's that document that it all trickles down from there. So if we want to do changes like that, or acreages per, that's the document that you're going to open up, but it's a can of worms when you open it up, which is not bad, but you have to be clear what you're trying
And
to
through the reef to the, it's also a policy, a planning policy on servicing standards that we have.
Perfect. Go on to part 2.
Okay. So part 2 of the presentation is related to on-site servicing thresholds. Council had requested clarification regarding some of these policies. So currently applications proposing 6 or more lots within a quarter section require the submission of and approval of an area structure plan or an area concept plan in connection to piped water and wastewater servicing. And that would be that, again, higher order plan that will guide how future lots are created and serviced when we get through subdivision and the DP stage. So administration has found that in our rural areas, the policies are functioning as intended. However, in some of the county's hamlets and urban areas, there's a misalignment between the municipal development plan and certain area structure plans, which I'll dive into here. So everything we really discussed and learned in part 1 of the presentation, it'll apply and will come in handy for this second part here in the next few slides. And really, I'll shape that kind of conflict a bit more here. So our MDP right now says only 5 lots. If you want to create more than that, this is how that's done. But we know that in many of our hamlet areas, think of Nameka, think of Cheadle, we're well beyond that 5 parcel threshold already. And in some of those communities, we don't have pipe servicing. So that's really something we need to consider as we move forward here and think about growth and change in these communities. So I have the guiding principles of the MDP, the county's municipal development plan, up on the screen here. Just as a bit of a refresher, the county's municipal development plan is a statutory policy document that provides general indication of potential growth over the next 20 to 30 years and overall direction on how this may be achieved. So at a high level, our guiding principles at the moment are protecting agricultural land, preserving economic features, promoting economic opportunity, encouraging responsible growth, supporting community development, and maintaining strong regional relationships. And these guiding principles were crafted with the input from the public through engagement sessions. Some of us might remember that in 2022. While the guiding principles establish the county's long-term vision for growth and development, the municipal development plan also outlines how these principles are applied in practice through policy. A foundational principle of land use planning is that concentrating development or density is generally more efficient than dispersed growth. It reduces pressure on infrastructure and municipal services. Directing development, as I mentioned in part 1 there, towards existing communities with that infrastructure helps limit the need for expanding infrastructure and supports more sustainable long-term growth. If we create more country residential parcels, likely we're bringing more families into the community. What are the implications? Perhaps it triggers a new school, extending the county's roads and these sorts of improvements. That said, the municipal development plan does recognize that some residential development may occur within the agricultural areas, provided it aligns with the guiding principles and does not result in undue land fragmentation, infrastructure challenges, or land use conflicts. And this, I guess, to support the balance, the county applies a criteria-based approach rather than broadly permitting or prohibiting development in specific locations. Proposals may be considered where they demonstrate alignment with that established criteria. So this places the responsibility on applicants or developers to carefully evaluate site suitability and potential impacts. And it allows the county to approach development from a perspective of, you can do this if criteria A, B, and C are demonstrated, rather than you're not allowed to have this here. So why only 5 lots? The 5 lot threshold aligns with a few provincial plans and requirements related to groundwater licensing, as we just discussed. Beyond the 5th lot on a quarter section of land, technical studies and licensing requirements increase significantly under the Water Act. And at that level, the province would have authority to comment on that additional usage and growth associated there. Maintaining this threshold also helps reduce fragmentation of agricultural land, encourages more comprehensive planning, and requires higher densities, encourages more comprehensive planning where higher density and growth is proposed. And it still allows for some lower density, up to 5 lots on a quarter section in our rural areas. So we did a regional comparison here. We looked at what our neighbors are doing and how our policies align. And it turns out Wheatland County is among the least restrictive in terms of additional residential subdivisions within our agricultural areas. You can see the table I have up on the screen here. We allow 4 parcels to be subdivided from a quarter section on top of the first parcel out for a total of 5. Again, provided that you can demonstrate you're not having an impact on the environment, you can draw water, safely treat wastewater, and that there's no impacts to the transportation network, to name a few. So administration is recommending that we maintain the existing 5 lot threshold for our agricultural areas, which is currently considered in the municipal development plan. But for our hamlets and existing urban communities, we do need a better understanding of how growth will take place there. As I mentioned, many of these communities are well beyond 5 parcels subdivided from a quarter section of land. And really administration is suggesting that the county have a study undertaken to identify the implications of allowing additional wells and private water treatment systems in those higher density areas, and how this fits within the broader legislative framework. Is that possible? Will the Water Act prevent additional wells? And then recommendations for accepting subdivision proposals in our existing hamlet areas to create an additional 10, 20 lots. What type of study should we be asking for with those proposals to support that future development? And that concludes part 2 here. Happy to take questions. And
Thank you, Councillor Clayton and Councillor Kester.
5 parcels in a quarter section, what kind of direction do you give to somebody that's trying to put 5 parcels in a quarter section to maintain the agricultural part of the land? If I put a quarter section pivot on it, how would you even do that? I just don't understand how you go from 2 parcels. We are now essentially 5. Most of those guys up there were around 1. How that maintains the integrity of the agricultural land. Thank you.
Through the Reeve to council, again, it is about a lot of the engagement that the county received when creating the policies that sought to strike that balance between preserving the ag land, but allowing for some flexibility for future development, for families to subdivide the land for future generations. A lot of our guiding principles speak to maintaining the agricultural character of the county and preserving the right to farm. But converting that land really comes down to the landowner. Somebody with a pivot, as you mentioned, might not pursue additional development there. We then have to look at our agricultural policies in the municipal development plan that spells out the criteria if you want to create additional lots. For example, we have a 20-acre maximum non-agricultural area. So for an unsubdivided quarter section, those additional 4 parcels should not exceed 20 acres of land. This is an attempt to preserve as much good ag land as we can while allowing some flexibility for future residential development. And then again, that's where some of those performance criteria are triggered. Are there impacts to the environment? Can you draw water? Can you treat wastewater? Can we safely access these future lots?
Yeah, so it's 4 subdivisions, but they cannot exceed 20 acres or 5, sorry. Yeah.
So they're limited to maximum 5 acres or 4 acres. Okay.
And
And if I had a pivot on a piece of land, I wouldn't sell them because that pivot's going to pay for that agriculture. You know what I mean? It's up to the landowner.
Well, if you put a pivot on a land, the corners of that pivot, if you're putting a circular thing, have enough land to subdivide at least 4 out. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, I just know that there's equipment out there that you can't turn around in a 5-acre piece sometimes, so thanks.
but 90% of the time it's the producer that's doing that, right? So it's they're taking that consideration in their business operations, right? So Councillor Kester.
Talk for a long time why these things are here, because I was here when they were developed. That'd be another day. But you just mentioned water and hamlets. A few years ago, Nightingale had lots of water. I have people in my division had lots of water. Built a new house, drilled a well, right beside an irrigation ditch. Nice place, lots of water. WID come and put all the water in a pipe. 2 years later, and no water, not a drop. Yeah. Nightingale there used to be a nice little, called it a slough. It was always wet, always water in it. It hasn't had water in it for years. And they're all on wells. So I don't know what the aquifer is like at Nightingale. Maybe that would be a good place to have a study done before we allow any more, because it's only been in the last few years, them houses that went up. Well, 20 years, but still, and an aquifer lifetime, that's short. I'm concerned a little bit about that. The whole county where there are acreages and WID and the interactions. Yeah. And now the WID, I don't know if you've heard, they want to expand. They're having a meeting, I think, next month for producers. existing water, more irrigated land, it's gonna be more piped water. That's the only ways they can get water from. So I think that's deserves some more thought for sure. Is water in hamlets.
Counselor Hepps?
So when we look at Wheatland versus Mountain View versus Foothill, Lacombe and Rocky View, we're 4 parcels versus 1. And that was just direction from previous councils? Because that's my first question.
Yeah, when did it change? Do we know that?
Through the Reeve, in Wheatland County, when did it increase? I'll say before my time, I might look at Councillor Kester here for some information, but I believe it was between 2010 and 2016 that we increased from 3 parcels to 5.
Through the Reeve to Council, the previous version, 2013, still had the 5 because I remember the policy carried through, so it might have changed prior to the 2013 amendments.
Yeah. Through the Reeve, the RGMS still actually speaks to 3 parcels, so it might be between 2011 and 2013.
So then the follow-up question would be like, having been through Foothills County quite a bit, there's way more than 1 parcel per quarter. Like, how are they squaring that circle? And Rocky View, I mean, there's not a full quarter section left in that county, right? Like, so how can they say, like, how are they getting around it? Because I would say that I certainly have ratepayers that do not want 6 acreages per quarter. So how do we get that number smaller and when we're this close to Calgary?
Through the Reeve, again, looking at some of those other examples, those other communities, again, this is where that threshold, where a higher standard of plan and servicing is required. So yes, in Foothills and Rocky View, once you're proposing more than 2 in Foothills, that's likely where an area structure plan with provision for a communal well or communal wastewater treatment is required. In Rocky View County, that's where we get these regional co-ops existing to service these lots. And oftentimes it is because we can't have that many wells to service that density or safely treat wastewater before there's a health implication, right? And sorry, would you repeat the second part of your question for me?
Well, my question just was like, how can they say this is what they're allowing when they're not? And then I would also back up that Foothills County does make you drill the well before you can sell the property, or they did when I was down there, which is 25 years ago now.
Through the Reeve, so this is was part of the conversations that were had, the engagement sessions that were had when the municipal development plan was created. This is where we heard the need or value in preserving ag land, but also other residents said, it's my land, I would like to have these rights. And so through these different competing interests, it was striking a balance. There was lots of back and forth to land on that number. And that's what happens in every community essentially. And if we're going beyond that level, then what? What's the new standard and the new requirements to allow that to happen?
Just real quick, do you have any more presentations? Because lunch is here, and I just want to ask council if you want to continue with discussion. I don't want to shortcome it, but some people might want to leave at lunch, or we could grab lunch and keep talking, or what does council want to do? Just keep talking and eat lunch after? I'm anticipating like another 10, 15 minutes we'll be done. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm seeing heads. Okay. Go ahead.
I was just curious, in our hamlets, how was it, like you said that the Water Act prevents you from having more than 5 or whatever parcels per quarter section, and yet in our hamlets, we have way more dense than that, but how come the Water Act didn't stop that development?
through the Reeve to Councillor Priest. So it's not that the Water Act would prevent additional wells. It's just that the report that's prepared by an installer or driller is then required to be reviewed by the province. And then they will have the authority at that point to essentially approve additional wells on the quarter or not. Or a higher standard again, perhaps it says pipe servicing is required. I know, for example, in areas where pipe servicing is required, you aren't allowed under the Water Act to drill a new well, or that would be something that's reviewed. And again, perhaps those regulations that form the Water Act came in long after the communities of Cheadle were created and subdivided, for example.
So what I was thinking is that if they're having to do a higher level of investigation into the well, if a well is, maybe that's all we need, is that it's being reviewed already, because if somebody is the 7th or 10th or 20th parcel and it needs a higher level of study to see if the water is available, then we're kind of covered. Maybe we have to just change our area structure plan to say that. Is that fair?
Through the Reeve to Councillor Priest, I think that is one of the outcomes of the study that we're requesting. Hopefully it will, again, if we look at just an individual lot, can we drill a well here and pump water? That's probably likely. Go down as far as you'd like. But in our hamlet communities, we probably want to understand the cumulative impact of these lots. And if we're adding 1 more, 7 more, what's the implication? And what should we be asking for to demonstrate that?
So are we trying to say that at a certain point, okay, we've built it out this far, and at this point we need to like look at some servicing that encompasses them all, like, yeah, okay, I understand. Yep.
No, Councillor Baker, then Councillor Hepps.
So when you have a house or a resident on a quarter section, not subdivided, that house is still under Ag General, right?
Through the Reeve, that's correct.
And then so when you start subdividing, we transfer those to country residential, right? No? The new ones, that's what I mean.
Through the Reeve, you could, for example, create a 5.1 acre parcel around that existing farmstead, and that would remain in the Ag General District.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then the next one would be under country residential? No. When does it become country residential?
Through the Reeve, so anything less than 5 acres in size, but greater than an acre would fit within country residential.
Less than 5 acre.
But with your example, you could create that 5 acre parcel around the existing farmstead, and then a 15 acre parcel. There's your 20 acre none.
So I'm still on these, I guess I'm still on these garden suites or secondary dwellings. So if it's Ag General, we could, well, what we could do is actually say anything that's under country residential has to be on the same well that's there. And leave the Ag General alone, because that leaves the farmers alone.
Through the Reeve, that's something we could look into with the servicing standards.
Yeah.
And what
Just a thought,
that
'cause
again would be.
I'll probably forget that the next time the MDP comes up.
One thing about that though, I mean, whether, how you classify it, if you build another house, you're only gonna use a minimal amount of water in a family, right? You know, I mean, and whether you drill another well or whether you use water out of that existing well, you know, it's probably not a big difference. One question I got about around the hamlets, like, so do we, I'm sure there is elsewhere, I know where there's some, but what about around our hamlets with a co-op water well and a co-op sewer? Where are we at on that type of stuff?
So through the Reeve, that's an option in, again, areas where there isn't already pipe servicing. If you created 8 lots from a quarter section, let's say, you could have a communal well and wastewater treatment system. Obviously, it would be incredibly expensive. But that's supported by the current policies and servicing plans. Yeah. And that would, again, be something that's reviewed under the Water Act and regulated by AEPA. As soon as you're using a communal system to provide water, wastewater for multiple homes, that's where they step into the planning process.
Yeah, for sure.
So to Councillor Hep's thing, I thought it was the punching of the aquifer. That's the they're trying to avoid so much punching into the aquifer.
I don't know. I don't think so because they're the guy selling it, right? No, I don't like.
So it all depends on the hydrology underneath the soils, which we're not aware of. Different areas have different, one quarter section have lots through it. I mean, you got to think every village, even Strathmore up until 30 years ago was on wells. Some of them are high production wells. And when you get up in the higher production wells, they need to do flow testing for 24, 48 hours to prove it, and Alberta Environment will license it. There is lots of water in some areas where you can support enormous amounts of development. That's where the hydro is off of one well. But what they're looking for when you drill an individual acreage is the driller's looking for that minimum requirement, which is very little, 1,200 and something cubes per year, which is 1.2 million liters. So that's not a lot of water over the years. If they start doing anything production wise, they need more. But I mean, I have access, and everybody does. There's an Alberta well website. It shows you all the registered wells in Alberta, all the drilling tests, everything that were done from the records. It pulls up on each one. That's where a hydrologist looks, and they pull up all that data. It's amazing how many wells are out there. But when a drought condition comes, or somebody says you've affected my water supply or quality, you need to have that data to back up that you haven't. I was in a municipality a long time ago, and there was 175 gallons a minute we pulled out, but it was below 375 feet. It had high fluoride. Like it's a cost thing. It had high fluoride. So do you treat that water? They ended up going on a regional water line, and the council made that decision. But you know, when you look at the hamlets that have no services, you have to be really clear what you're looking at, because if the population thinks you're going to solve their well problem now, you have to be really clear that may not be the case. You're looking to the future, because if you're going to do the study, you better be sure you're going to try to fix it. And if you want to fix it, you don't necessarily have to.
So I guess my question is, so if we decided to take one well, put a pump on it, and you've got a hamlet of 10 residents, is it beneficial? Isn't it the punching in the aquifer from all 10 that affect the water? That's what I thought, why we're
You need
trying
a
to avoid
hydrologist in
that.
here to tell you that. And it's voodoo science. The guys have to, yeah, but Alberta has enormous amounts of data because we've had that coal bed methane. There's actually more information available in Southern Alberta than anywhere else. But to get it from the oil and gas to the water is different. It's a different lens. So they know where it's all at. But when you get over servicing more than one person, that's why I said there was an uncertified system. So if you provide more than one person, you need to have a treatment system and a certified operator. There's a small systems, and then there's different parts of it, and that's where the costs go up. If you go into Rocky View or on Prairie Royal Estates and all those ones where there's a high density, they are all water co-ops, and I would not drink the water there, but it's safe water, but it's bad water. And the problem is, if these HOAs or something default and they can't fix it anymore, they look to the municipality to fix their problem.
But I'm saying, okay, these garden suites, it's not any advantage to have one well or two.
The original well could be, it depends how much they're using on it, I guess, but the original well could have been designed, there'll be say so many GPM, that could have been 35 years ago. And they only say a well lasts up to 25 years. Generally, a driller will tell you that's its end of life. We all know that there's
Oh,
many
geez.
wells around that have been, I know lots that are 60, 70 years old, but some will fail, some will not. I know some that are less than 10 years old that have completely failed. Because of what Councillor Kester said with Weeping Canals, I've seen it firsthand with where I lived. They've put it in pipe and all of a sudden my well went dry. And it was there for 70 years, that well, and it was fine. Yeah. And they say, a hydrologist will say, no, that doesn't influence that. There's no way it could have because it was 160 feet deep, but it obviously did. Yeah. So,
Through the reef to Councillor Baker as well, that is a factor that would be considered, but it does depend on the location, like we're discussing. But anytime you're drilling a well as well, you need to treat the wastewater on the other side. And that's where in our hamlet areas, it can become, we're hitting that sweet spot. We have an aquifer, we're punching holes into it. How much wastewater can the land treat before, there's a health implication? Not everybody's drinking their well water, but that still needs to be considered. And that's some of the information we're hoping to glean from a study. What are these considerations? Are there thresholds? If a developer comes in to build in Cheeto, for example, what do we need to be asking for to responsibly evaluate that proposal?
all it takes is money to fix the problem. And generally, from what I've seen, the water supply is the limiting factor, not the sewer. I've seen a lot of regional systems that have a water supply and all their sewer is done on property. The limiting factor is more the water supply that I've seen. Unless you get into places with a high water table or, riverbanks or something like that.
Through the reef, I believe we have hamlets that function on a system just like that. So,
Well, Clooney has, everybody's on a well, but they have a sewer. Opposite.
the opposite. Yeah. Sorry.
Same with all our community halls. I think Nightingale had a huge expansion years and years ago, and most of their cost was in the sewer system because you have 300 people in a room for a night, but that sewer has to pump out over the next week to try to disperse it into the ground. That's the reality of it. So, any further questions? Great discussions. I appreciate it. Well, we can't make a decision today. Anyway. Well, there is a motion. Yes. Does anyone want to make the motion? Do we want to go down the road of the Hamlet thing? That's something that is interesting. Is there any thing that is blaring right at the moment? Like, is there concerns, or is this proactive instead of reactive?
Through the reef, we've had folks reaching out, landowners, developers, who are looking at future development in some of our hamlet areas, and the conflicting policies are really adding a lot of questions to forthcoming proposals.
And would this attaining further information, would that be for future growth and not for existing?
Through the reef, I assume it would have to look at both.
Okay.
Again, the cumulative impacts, the current conditions would have to be factored in, right?
Okay.
So what is the cost? Is there any kind of estimate on the cost?
Through the reef, I might defer to Sherry on this one.
Through the reef to council, we don't have any estimates at this time. We'd probably use one of our third-party consultants that are already retained by the county, and the planning budget does have money set aside for these types of studies. And so it would be within the budget to use it for that study. And just so you know, I'm not sure if Mr. Bullock would have an idea of what that type of study, if it's around 100,000, a little, I couldn't even.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, but one thing administration could do is as CEO Bears mentioned, is just go get some quotes on with the scope of work and bring that back to council, or do it within the existing budget. And if it exceeds that, we can bring it back to council and
Sure.
share that.
So would this motion encapsulate that, bringing it back to council with the scope and everything? Okay, perfect. Someone want to make that motion?
I'll move that the committee accept the report as information and direct administration to obtain further information regarding the use of on-site servicing in hamlets and urban communities. And bring it back to council at a further date.
Future date. Perfect. Motion's on the floor. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. Any other matters? I will adjourn this meeting at 12:14 PM and we have lunch. Thank you.